Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Yesterday I decided to play out the F4D-1 for a few games just to kind of get a handle on it and how I kind of feel about it. I got a bunch of test drives from Gaijin since I'm part of the partnership program for each of the vehicles, and I decided to pick the F4 because it was, well, the most interesting to me to play. The Leopard 2AV is just another Leopard. It will be completely fine, and it will be, just a standard Leopard. It will work incredibly well. The Haruna looks like a vehicle which would also do completely fine, just maybe not completely meta because of a little bit of lack of armor here and there. But the F4D-1, especially at the BR of 9.3, seemed interesting to me since that BR range is so volatile, and I was wondering if this vehicle would fit into it well. And I think it's unfortunately stuck between two mountains, and this is the overall problem with the BR bracket in general, so I don't really blame the vehicle for this, but it does have the similar issues that a lot of other vehicles around that BR has. So looking at its general stats, a lot of people have commented on the amount of ammo it has, how it has 420mm Browning Colts with 260 rounds of ammo. Now, if you compare that to other Colt guns, probably something like the Demon comes to mind. The Demon has, for its Mark 12 Mod 3s, 760 rounds of ammo. So you can see why, some people are displeased by the ammo count. But to be honest, for me, the 20mm Brownings are some of the best guns in the game when it comes to jets. They have a very, very high velocity, very good fire rate, and all you have to really do is tap it and you can be able to kill a lot of targets. I really enjoyed them when I used the Demon, and I've really enjoyed them using this thing as well when it comes to F4D-1. Talking about the stats that I got in it, so I played it in realistic yesterday, and we played 21 battles in it, 13 wins, so 61% win rate, and also we got 44 air kills and 10 deaths. So basically dying about half the time and going for about a 4-to-1 KD, which overall, is pretty good. As I said, the guns are nice. One thing that you can do with the guns if you want, so the way that they're set up is similar to a few other vehicles. You can actually use your primary and secondary weapons to split the cannons. So I have them set to 1 and 2 on my keyboard. If I use 1, then it only fires 2 out of the 2 out of the 4 cannons, and then if I hit 2, it fires the other 2. So if you're worried about the longevity of the cannons, you can actually double the amount of time that you can have them firing by, doing that simple trick. The other thing is the AIM-9Bs. So the AIM-9Bs are also split between 2 sets. No idea why. It seems very odd to me that that is the case, because basically, they're still the standard same missiles. So yeah, they're split as well. So you can do weapon selection on them. I think the idea is you can fire the inner ones if you want, or the outer ones, but I find it very hard to tell which is which since they basically look exactly the same, unfortunately. So overall, the armament on this, I think, is fine for 9.3. I know people don't like the AIM-9Bs, that's fine. AIM-9Bs for me are a way of slowing down vehicles, so you can get in range to use the guns. And if you do that with the F4D, it'll work completely fine. You can catch pretty much anything in this thing around the BR, apart from stuff which is already cantering away from you. The F4D with its afterburner has a ridiculous amount of acceleration on it. The afterburner thrust is 7,270 kgf, whereas the standard max thrust without the afterburner is only 4,000 on it. So it's hugely afterburner reliant, and because it's really afterburner reliant, it chews through fuel really quickly. The afterburner just eats it alive. You probably have about maybe 6 or 7 minutes at most going full afterburner, which nowadays in jets and realistic is not too bad. Usually the battles happen between like the 3 and 5 minute mark, so it's not too shabby. But if you've won that initial battle and maybe there's a few guys left, make sure to have a look at your fuel counter, otherwise you're going to fall out of the air. The other thing as well If you're not using the afterburner, this thing just flies like a brick. It cannot gain speed, really, at sufficient levels to be able to compete against other vehicles that are around the place. A lot of vehicles without their afterburner can kind of cruise pretty well. The Lightning, for example, at the same BR is pretty good without the afterburner if you're just kind of like chilling on it, so you want to conserve fuel. The F4D is not one of those aircraft. You will lose energy so quickly with this thing. But sometimes that's not actually a bad thing to do. I found when I was in one-on-one situations, the actual being able to bleed energy super quick was really nice. This thing, if you leave the afterburner on, sits around 1,000 to 1,100 kilometers an hour in a straight line. That's completely fine. But it turns like a brick if you sit at those speeds. The other thing is it does have an issue with ripping. If you are pulling the aileron and the elevator at the same time while at those speeds and you lose speed very quickly, it will just fall apart. I very much recommend uninstalling your boosters. I only ripped it once, but when I was test flying it before, I was able to rip it a ton of times. So basically, I know what its limits are. So you know, it's you got to be a bit careful of that. The other thing to also note is even though it doesn't maneuver very well around that 1,000 to 1,100 where a lot of other jets do, between 500 and 750, this thing turns fantastically well. So my general way of playing one-on-one situations was to engage at about 1,000 to 1,100, set up in a defensive flying posture in a loop or in a turn, cut the afterburner, cut it down to about 750, kick in the elevators, and then flip over and attack the enemy. If they decide to turn fight you, you annihilate them. If they decide to run away from you, then you can chuck the afterburner on, and then you can run after them with good acceleration, use the M9Bs to slow them down, and then you're in a good position to fight them. It works actually pretty well for the machine, but obviously that's a independent like one-on-one scenario. Those happen at like the end of the matches or maybe in the start of the matches. Usually you're not in a one-on-one scenario with this thing, so that is a bit of a problem with it. The radar's completely useless on it. It does have a tracking radar, I think it's called. Basically, you can track targets. The only reason to do that is to tell the enemy where you are, if they have an RWR, or to fake them into believing they're going to get missiled. But at 9.3, the only real sparrows or only real I suppose semi-actives you're going to run into are pretty poor ones. Like until you get to like the higher tiers of the game, the semi-actives or the actives are not very good. Like the ones on stuff like the Crusader or the Phantom or even on the MiG-21s, they're not really worth it unless you're at really low energy. So you don't have to worry about that. RWR, once again, doesn't have, but since semi-actives aren't that much of an issue, not too much of a problem. It'd be an issue in ground forces if you decide to run this thing, because you know you won't be able to tell if a radar AA is tracking you. But to be honest, I don't think this thing's good in ground forces. Even though it's maneuverable and it'll be good for dogfighting, it only gets access to rockets. And to be honest, there isn't really a proper 9.3 lineup for America. Like you have stuff like the Bradley, you know, you have stuff like the MBT-70 that you can run, but compared to the other BRs that are around it, it's not very good, right? It's not a great lineup. I suppose you can throw the Sergeant York in there too, but still, I don't think I would run that setup. I would much prefer bringing like an A4E or something with its AGMs. So the vehicle is pretty limited in its use in different game modes. It's only really going to be good in the aviation parts of things, and really good is a bit of an overstatement. So we've talked about a lot of its positives, you know, its maneuverability at certain speeds, its armament not being too bad, and overall it flies pretty nicely. I really enjoy Delta Wings in the game, even like the Javelin, like being able to like bleed speed hard, so you can, you know, win a specific engagement, and then you try and push that advantage. It works really well. The Mirage 3s, for example, they're insanely good at it because they have really good engines as well on top of everything. But there are issues with the F4D. And the main issues with this thing are pretty simple. It doesn't have countermeasures. So if you get jumped on If you get jumped on, you'll usually die if you're against something which has good missiles. Most things don't, but a lot of the meta things these VRs do, and the matchmaking is absolutely horrific for this thing. So in about the 20 matches, about 16 or 17 of them were 10-0 to 9-0 or 10-3 to 9-3. So it's getting more up-tiered than it is down-tiered. The matches where we had one match which was 9-3 to 8-3, and then we had a few matches which were 9-7 to 8-7. In those matchmaking brackets, it feels really, really nice. Like, everything about it feels good. You don't have anything that really can kill you. The thing with it as a vehicle is because it has this really good acceleration and also maneuverability. As long as you manage its speed well, you can pretty much dogfight or kill anything that's 9-3, 9-0, 8-7 very, very easily. But anything higher than that, which has better missiles and sometimes better speed, if they get into a better position than you do at the start of the battle, then they just cane you. And this is not an F4D problem, this is a matchmaking problem. This has been going on for a long time. That's why if you actually have a look at the 9-3 BR for aircraft, a lot of the aircraft at 9-3 have been moved, or the ones which are there are seen as pretty dead. There's only a few that actually get played at this BR, and it's the Yak-38, and that's because it has R60s on it, and also the premium one, and then the Su-7, because it's the premium one and people use it to grind. All of the other 9-3s, like stuff like the Lightning, the F-86 F40, the CL-13, you hardly see ever, because they're in this black hole, and the F4D kind of joins them in that. If you get up to 10-3, there are so many 10-3s that can just eat you alive. Whether it's stuff like the MiG-21 SMT or MF, whether it's the Mirage 3s, whether it's the F-5Cs, they all really annihilate you pretty easily. So that can be a tough one. Against stuff like 10-0s, the only ones which I struggle against are stuff like the A5Cs, for obvious reasons, Magics once again. So that's a bit of a problem, but everything else is not too bad. So it's dependent so much on its matchmaking, and it means that it has this kind of feast or famine set. And that will change over time, as it always does when meta BRs change, and also the top stuff gets bumped up, and then everything else kind of gets moved in between. But it is just kind of annoying that it's at that stage. So there was matches where I felt I could not do anything. I was just sat there watching either my team win or lose, and then I would get jumped on or we would win. And then there was matches where I felt very dominant in a down tier. The other thing is the repair cost of this thing, at least right now, is 20,000 SL. That's quite big. If you compare it to pretty much all of the other American jets at the rank 6, I don't think any of them have a 20,000 repair cost anymore. Most actually sit around the 13,000 to 15,000 part. Even like the F4C Phantom, its repair cost is at 7,800. At max. The Demon is about 15k. The Cougar is at 19k, so that's probably the highest one, but it's still not as high as the F4D-1. And the F4D-1 does get pretty much the same rewards as the other stuff. There's not too much difference between it, since it's a standard vehicle, slightly less and then slightly more on certain things. But yeah, so that's going to hurt a few people, especially while grinding it. Remember, I played this thing when it was spaded. When this thing doesn't have the G-suit or the engine, it's going to be an absolute pain to play. It's going to be just the Javelin 2.0. But spaded, it does actually have a chance, and it does do pretty well, depending on the matchmaking. It was actually quite fun to play this thing, I'm not going to lie. I had a good time. Will I play it again until the matchmaking changes? No, I won't touch it, because I don't like the feeling of being in a vehicle where I just cannot do anything. So I'd much prefer to play like 10-3s, I'd much prefer to play 10-0s, where I have some kind of advantage over everything that I fight, and then we can kind of go from there. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Nicholas Richardson, Elove Goat, Pyman675, Winter Scientist, Merciless Reaper, Jerry Prevolt, Megadino King, Orange Tail, Teddy, John Ryman, Universe, Ambrosius McClellan, Daniel Stanton, Moxie, B. Young, Uncle Bean, Sem Arslan, Derek R., Bareen, Lafouche, and Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.